He's currently working for the Department of Defense in Baltimore, Maryland. So without further ado, he's going to tell you a little bit more about himself, and then we'll get underway.
Can you hear me okay without the mic? Back okay? All right. I tend to walk around a little bit. All right. Well, it's great to be here with Federalist Society. I graduated from the University of Idaho in 2012. I was one of the chapter presidents for the University of Idaho Federalist Society chapter. And if you're not a member, this is really all about the connections you make, and you as future job seekers, any connection you can make is fantastic. I wouldn't be here today if I had not been a member of the Federalist Society back then. Some of the agencies I work in 7 different states as a private contract examiner for law enforcement, departments of corrections, attorneys, and private individuals, mostly out west. Basic education and certification you already talked about, we don't need to get that. First thing I want to talk about is Polygraph and how you as future attorneys are going to be able to use Polygraph, be exposed to Polygraph, and the first thing you want to know is do I have a good Polygraph examiner? That can be hard to know in a number of different states. If you look up here, all the states in yellow, they don't have any state licensing for Polygraph examiners. Anybody could put their hand up and go, hey, I'm a good Polygraph examiner, and you have no way of knowing because there is no state licensing agency. So I'm going to refer you to a website called polygraph.org. That is the American Polygraph Association website. You can look up by name and by state everyone who is certified by the American Polygraph Association as having met good basic standards and protocols to be working in the industry. All right, so this is the major area we're going to be talking about today. It's law enforcement and future attorneys. This is probably where most of your exposure to Polygraph is going to come from. And law enforcement agencies do 5 major types of typical exams. You have pre-employment, counterintelligence, intelligence, specific issue, guilty knowledge, and internal affairs. Now, pre-employment, how many of you are looking to go like federal government, FBI? All right. Those, typical place we're going to do pre-employment. Any of those places you want to get a security clearance, or I'm working at the DOD, I have to take a polygraph as part of that security clearance process. And a pre-employment polygraph exam deals with issues where we are trying to eliminate bad applicants. So we're trying to find out a whole bunch of things about that person's history. So we're trying to find out if they've committed past criminal acts, what their involvement with illegal drugs was, any past sex acts that would be considered criminal. Have they been honest on their application? So because we're trying to hit 5, 6, 7, 8 different targets, this is called a screening exam. We're trying to screen bad applicants out, and because we have so many targets that we're trying to hit, well, this is not our most accurate polygraph exam. We're dividing where it is that they're taking and spending their time and looking at. Now, we use this to get information to make a good decision. I mean, if we talk about past illegal drug use, well, if you guys are 23, 24, 25 years old, you smoked some weed in high school, and we're doing a 10-year review, well, we're not going to limit people because they smoked some weed in high school. All right. What we want to find out is what did you use? How often did you use it? And is that something that you've grown out of? And if you have, well, usually we're going to be able to take and work with most anything. Now, if you're sitting there and you're growing and manufacturing and traffic and dealing, probably not so much. All right, next area, intelligence, counterintelligence. And this is where I'm spending all my time at this point. The Department of Defense, 7 different agencies we got listed up there. I got a number of internal exams that the DOD ran on people, whether they were applicants or current employees trying to maintain their security clearance. We ran from May 2010 to April 2011 over 43,000 internal exams. That's pre-Edward Snowden. Post-Edward Snowden, that number's tripled. All right. So when you get done with law school and you decide, what do I want to do as an attorney? I'm not sure. Well, you show up at the DOD with your Juris Doctorate, and usually that's a grade 11, grade 12 job. We hired 5 law school individuals into the polygraph division in the past 24 months, walking over there because their ability to interview and investigate and ask good questions was a very natural fit for that. So when you get done and you're looking for a job, that might not be a bad route for you because all of these agencies hire. All right, specific issue. This is really the quintessential polygraph that most people think of when they think of a polygraph. One thing. Did you rob the bank? Did you steal the car? Did you manufacture the drugs? One narrow issue. And with one narrow issue, what we're trying to find out is, did you do it? So we're trying to get our prime suspects in there. And with our prime suspect, this is going to be a voluntary thing. We can't force somebody to come in and take a polygraph exam. We're going to ask them to come in and take a polygraph exam. And if they say no, well, law enforcement can't stop investigating what it is that's going on there. They're going to take and move on to more likely suspects or people who might have additional knowledge. So, if, this person won't come in, who do we move to next? Significant other. That's going to be the person who has the most intimate knowledge of that particular individual. We move on to the guilty knowledge exam to find out, do they know who did these things? Did they help plan do these things? Do they know any of these end goals that were accomplished? To give you an example, when I was up at law school at the University of Idaho, we had a small jurisdiction 30 miles south of Lewiston Police Department. And they had a case where a senior citizen had 200 oxycodone pills that had been stolen from the house. These were big 120s. They were grindable, smokable. Street value in Lewiston, Idaho was $200 per pill. High value items. So we're talking about $40,000 worth of prescription medication that was on the street there. And the Lewiston Police Department had investigated this crime for more than 500 man-hours and had come up with one suspect, the caregiver for this senior citizen. Now, they asked this caregiver, will you come in and take a polygraph exam? And she, of course, said, no, I'm not going to do that. So they called me up and said, well, what can we do? I'm like, well, who knows her? Who might have some knowledge about what went on? Well, this woman happened to be married. Her husband happened to be on probation. In the great state of Idaho, when you are on probation, your contract for probation requires you to take any test that your probation officer requests of you, and if you refuse, you are now in violation of your contract, and he would have gone away on a 12-month rider. Well, he was not interested in spending Christmas incarcerated, so he said, sure, I'll come in and take your polygraph exam. So we get in there and we ask him, did you steal any of that missing medication? Do you know for sure who stole any of that missing medication? Do you know where any of that missing medication is right now? The question that he failed was, do you know for sure who stole any of that missing medication? Well, given the facts of that particular case, we were going to assume that he was going to be naming his wife because she was the only person that the police department had come up with in all of their investigation. So we get him in there for his post-test interrogation, and we tell him, look, obviously you failed your exam. You know who did this. What happened? He's like, well, I know everybody thinks it was my wife that did this, but that's not what happened. And he sits there silent for like 15 seconds. We're like, okay, what did happen? Like, well, about a week before this incident, we were at a party. We got introduced to this guy, and my wife started talking about work. Typical subject, and she mentions that she is a caregiver. And all of a sudden, this guy gets super interested in what a caregiver does. He's like, well, what do you have to do? Well, I have to cook for him, I have to clean for him, I have to take him to his doctor's appointments. Really? How often do you have to take him to doctor's appointments? She's like, we're gone every Friday, like all afternoon. He's got all these specialists he's got to see. Well, how come? Well, I got to make sure all of his medications are on track and we've got the right dosages and it's doing what it's supposed to be. Well, what kind of medications does he take? He's got like blood pressure, cholesterol, pain medication, and the red light went off for that guy. He had pumped this poor woman for information, found out what time they were out of the house, what medications were in the house. Very next Friday is when this incident occurred. Now, the guy that this person was naming was nowhere on the police's radar, even after 500 man-hours of investigation. You think about what a police detective makes, 17 to 25 bucks an hour, depending on the jurisdiction. That was like $15,000 worth of taxpayer money that they had invested in this investigation to come up with one person. Well, based on this information, it wasn't enough to get a warrant, but it was certainly enough to go knock on this guy's door. So they roll out 7 a.m. Saturday morning, knock on the door. Guy falls out of bed. He's like, hello. We're like, hi, we're from the Lewiston Police Department. Can we come in and talk to you? He's like, Yeah, sure, come on in. He opens the door, they walk in, plain view, coffee table, 180 oxycodone pills, case closed in 24 hours. That exam cost them $250. You compare that with the $15,000 they'd spent in detective salary investigating that crime. I had to call every month my second and third year of law school to come down and do polygraph exams for the Wilson Police Department at about the 50 man-hour mark instead of the 500 man-hour mark. So you can see where it can be super helpful. All right, internal affairs. This is really the worst kind of exams we have to do as polygraph examiners, but sometimes good people make some bad choices. And if we're going to do pre-employment polygraph exams to find the right applicants and employees, if we're going to use them as part of our criminal investigations, well, we certainly do them as part of internal investigations if there are reports of wrongdoing on our own staff there. Now, typically, we do not test our own people in our own department. I mean, anybody worked law enforcement before? Anybody been in the military? All right. I mean, when you're in the military, you're part of a team. You have to be able to trust the people on your team. And if you take and drag somebody on your team in there for a polygraph exam, number one, I'm not going to be able to give them an unbiased test. I mean, if I've been sweating and crying and everything else with this person for the last bunch of years, there's no unbiased test going on there. So we want to make sure we've got an unbiased test. We also want to make sure we're not damaging that teamwork, because if I drag them in there for a polygraph exam, even if they are successful in that exam, they're not going to be happy about the fact that I had to test them. So typically we will only test for outside jurisdictions to make sure we're not damaging our teamwork, make sure we're also getting an unbiased test. All right, so why are we using polygraph exams? That's not one thing, it's money. You know, Houston cannot hire 50,000 detectives to investigate all criminal offenses at the level that they'd like to be able to do it. They just simply have limited budgets, limited resources, and so they need to be able to allocate their investigative tools and resources and solve as many crimes as they possibly can. And so the way that that's going to take and look is, well, crime happens, gets reported, gets investigated, they identify their suspects, and if they feel the polygraph's going to be in order, they'll ask that person if they'll come in and take a polygraph exam. Now, if that person says no, well, they're certainly within their rights to do that, but as a law enforcement agency, we have to treat that as a red flag. We're going to have to assume that that person's involved. That's why they're not coming in to take the polygraph exam. So we will continue to allocate resources to investigating that individual. Now, we do all of our investigation, comes up dry, okay, well, so be it, but at least we didn't back off of somebody that we should continue to investigate. Now, if this person comes in and they take the polygraph and they are successful, fantastic. Now we know, move that person to the bottom of the list. We need to move on with our resources, investigate more likely suspects, and if we work through everybody else and get back to that person, well, at least initially, we weren't spending our time investigating somebody that successfully completed a polygraph exam. Now, if this person comes in and fails, fantastic. Now we get to interrogate that person. We get to find out what their involvement was. And this is by far the biggest use of polygraph for law enforcement is when somebody comes in, they take the examination, they fail, we get confessions. Now we got a bunch of criminal law people here. Who knows what percentage of criminal law cases typically go to trial? What do we got? Yeah, super low. I mean, 2 to 4% is pretty typical depending on the jurisdiction. Well, that means 96, 98% of cases never even see the courtroom. They either get pled out or the charges get dropped. I was driving through Nebraska at election time and the ad on the radio was re-elect your DA. 30 years experience, 97% conviction rate. No DA has a 97% conviction rate unless they have a ton of confessions that their police department's doing a great job for them on, and they're highly risk averse. They're not going to take questionable cases to trial that they think they might lose because it affects what they've got going on there. So how many of you are looking to be future prosecutors? All right, you future prosecutors, you hope you've got a good police department with a fantastic polygraph program that brings you a whole bunch of confessions, because you get to chalk those up in the win column, and you didn't have to do a whole heck of a lot to get that there. But that's where having, Texas is nice that it's got state licensing. It's actually one of the best states in terms of state licensing and the program that they take and run here to make sure that you have quality polygraph examiners. You go out to California and your primary care physician can be an acupuncturist. Well, that tells you what you can have in terms of your polygraph examiner. Now, how many of you are future defense attorneys? Besides all the future prosecutors when they retire become defense attorneys. All right. So future defense attorneys, well, you've got a lot of options you've got available to you as well. Number one, you can take and you can polygraph your own client. If somebody, as a defense attorney, has a polygraph conducted on their client, that is at no risk of going over to the other side. That is attorney work product in preparation for trial. So, if you don't want the results to go over, they're not going over. But, if you got this client and they're all going to adamantly say, well, I didn't do it, and you don't want to have a whole bunch of surprises, well, you can have your guy take a polygraph exam. And if he comes in and he passes the polygraph exam, well, you can feel really good about that, number one, because that tells you they may well make a decent witness as well, because a polygraph is not a very relaxing situation. You get into a stressful environment, and if you're successful there, well, it tells you may well be in pretty good shape for some of this other stuff. And now, it can also be good for corroborating witnesses. Joey's the person who's going to trial for some armed robbery, and his buddy Billy's the one who's saying he wasn't there. We were hanging out playing Xbox all the time, and, well, Billy's a former felon. Well, maybe you want to give Billy a polygraph exam just to make sure we got a good story there, because you can use it for remonstration purposes with your client. Most of the time, your future prosecutors, you're going to have a case, and you'll look at it and go, well, I tell you what, I'll offer you this deal. Instead of giving you a felony 1, I'll maybe offer you a felony 2 or a felony 3 if you save us the time and expense of having to go to trial. But if you go to trial and you lose, well, that plea agreement's going to be off the table. Instead of being a 1 to 5 or maybe 1 to 15, now you're looking at a felony 1, 15 to life, depending on your state sentencing structure. Well, it might be a good idea to remonstrate with your client and go, hey, that plea agreement's going to be gone if we go to trial, and when your buddy doesn't pass his polygraph exam and we've got no other good corroborating or exculpatory witnesses, might be a good place to be able to take and use that. Okay, so, raffle. Here's the raffle draw. All right, I'm going to have somebody give me a number. I'm just going to count back and figure out who that person is. I have 2 trivia questions for you. You get those 2 trivia questions right, we're going to move on to Zach with our demo, and if Zach beats me on the demo, I'll pay for the bar review course of your choice. All right? Give me a number between 1 and
47.
47. You, ma'am, on the end. All right. Do you have evidence yet?
Yes.
Ready? You got it. All right, let me look at okay. So, first question. What is a federal case that established the admissibility standard of expert scientific testimony, including polygraph? Very first case we're going to do that. And like I said, we got some interested over there. I'll let you forward friend on the first. It is Fried case, 1923. This is a test where you have William Marston, who gave Mr. Fry a polygraph exam, or they called it a polygraph exam. It really wasn't a polygraph exam. It's what they call a discontinuous systolic blood pressure deception detection test. So what they would do is they would take and ask you a question, you'd answer the question, they put a blood pressure cuff on you, they pump it up, and they see what your systolic blood pressure was, and then they let it off, and wait a minute, and then they'd ask you another question and go through that same process. That was the only thing that they were taking and getting a measure of was systolic blood pressure. All right, now, the Supreme Court in 1923 said, you know what, the systolic blood pressure deception detection test does not meet generally accepted scientific principles in the scientific community. And so they laid out this whole Fry test of what you have to do to have expert scientific testimony be admissible in trial. So that's what established it. Now, Daubert has replaced that on a federal basis, and now we have the judge who is the gatekeeper as to what gets in and what doesn't. All right, so we'll let that one go. You had great teammates. This one, you're all on your own. All right, so what is the only state in the country that allows expert polygraph testimony as part of criminal prosecutions under their Rule of 702 evidence? You do not have to have any pre-stipulation. It is not Texas. We wish it was Texas. Texas is a huge state. It's got a huge population. It's got plenty of criminals, so we have lots of data to be able to say how does polygraph impact what's going on in those cases. Anybody know what the answer is to that question? I believe it's a neighboring state of yours. My geography's a little rough right now, but New Mexico. New Mexico is fully court admissible. New Mexico had a case where they went through a 707 Daubert hearing. They made the determination that their Rule 702 evidence that specifically allows for polygraph evidentiary testimony was satisfied, and so in the state of New Mexico, you can get a polygraph in without any pre-stipulation or anything. And so this becomes important, Daubert and Fry, as it relates to the states and how they choose to treat polygraph evidence. So green state, thumbs up. It's coming in, doesn't matter, you don't have to pre-stipulate. Yellow states, they basically follow a Fry standard where, sorry, it doesn't come in. We've already kind of said ixnay on that. So in a yellow state, you're not getting polygraph evidence in. But again, if only 2 to 4% of your criminal cases, polygraph would be something you'd look to introduce anyway. Well, those 96 to 98% of cases, when you get those confessions, that's what you're really looking for. It's not about getting polygraph testimony in. It's getting the confession and getting that conviction. Now, in blue states, and I operated in a whole bunch of blue states out west there, we follow the Daubert standard. And Daubert's fantastic because Daubert has what is called a pre-stipulated polygraph exam. And so what happens is, my DA here, he has a terrible case. He said, she said, no scientific evidence, no fingerprints, no blood, no hair, DNA, anything. Well, he's like, you know what, I don't feel too good about my case. So what I'm going to do, Mr. Defendant, is I'll offer you an opportunity. If you come in and you take a polygraph and you pass, I'm going to drop the charges. If you come in and you fail, you are required to accept a plea agreement, and if you renege on that, then the polygraph is going to be fully court admissible. And Mr. DA here knows if I have she said plus failed polygraph expert testimony, I'm probably going to win my case now. So what usually happens is I get calls from defense attorneys who'd say, hey, Brian, I need a polygraph exam. My guy just got out for a pre-stipulated polygraph, and I'm not going to send him to the wolves. I want to know how he's going to do. So he comes in, takes a polygraph. If he passes, like 5 seconds later, he's on the phone calling the DA going, when can we take your super reliable polygraph exam? He comes in and he fails for me. Well, he doesn't do anything. About 30 days later, the DA calls him up and goes, hey, we offered you a pre-stipulated polygraph exam. When are you coming in? And he's like, we're not taking your super unreliable polygraph exam. You could just go prove your case. And most of the time, the DA at that point goes, crap, didn't work. And he ends up dropping the charges because, like, I don't have a good case. I was just trying to get something else that I could take and utilize. And not having that, I don't have a good faith belief that I can prove my case beyond a reasonable doubt. So they end up dropping the charges. Okay, so what we're going to do now, we're going to do a demo with Zach here. Come on up, Zach, and we'll let people see what's going on. All right, so here's the setup of this. What we're doing here is what is called an acquaintance exam. Seat yours. It's basically a practice test. What it does, it allows the person who's doing it to see what it's like to have the components on, how I ask questions, spacing between the questions. The major focus for the acquaintance exam is so that I can calibrate the instruments to the person's body. I want to make sure their body responds appropriately, that I have the right sensitivity level set before I move on to a test I'm going to do data analysis on. So I'm going to ask him about simply numbers on a piece of paper. I had 6 different numbers, 6 different cards. I asked him to just take a card, look at the number, stick it in his pocket, not show me what the number is. So that's what I'm going to be asking you about is regarding the number written on the piece of paper in your pocket, is it the number? We're just going to go in order on a list 1 through 10. I've instructed him to answer no every single time for me. Obviously that means once he'll be lying, but that's important. I need to make sure his body responds again appropriately before we move on to that next test. Now, when we talk about test results on a polygraph exam, we've got 3 major results that we can have. We have deception indicated, meaning they're not being truthful. No deception indicated, just palm down on your thigh there, meaning they are being truthful. And then what we call inconclusive. And as a polygraph examiner, I'm not there to guess. Either I have the data to support making a professional decision, or I don't. And sometimes people have things going on in their life that is more important than the polygraph exam. I'll give you an example. Yeah, just calm down there. I had a bank that we were doing investigation for, and when there's a nominal loss, that falls within EPA and allows us to do that. So a bank had $4 million that had been embezzled. We were testing all the people who had reasonable access to it to find out what their involvement was. Bank vice president comes in to take the test, and he comes up as inconclusive. And so I'm asking him, how do you not know whether you stole $4 million from your bank or not? And he's like, you know, Brian, it's 20 to 12, and at 12 o'clock, the woman I've been having an affair with for the last 2 years is showing up on my doorstep at home, and if I'm not there, she's talking to my wife. It takes me 15 minutes to get home. Can I leave now? Sure, go home. Go home. So he leaves, comes back 2 days later, and he passes with flying colors. The fact that his 2-year affair was about to blow up in his face was more important than $4 million missing from his bank. So sometimes people have things going on that are more important than taking the polygraph exam. You know, somebody had a close family member die in the last couple weeks. Not a good time to take a polygraph exam. Somebody just had a car accident. They've got whiplash. They're in physical pain. We can usually wait weeks, if not months, for somebody to take a polygraph exam to make sure they are both mentally and physically in the right frame of mind to be able to take a polygraph exam. Okay, so this test should take about 2.5, 3 minutes long. We're going to see how good Zach is at lying. While he doesn't have a bar review course on the line, he's got $40 on the line. I told him if he beats me, I'll give him whatever money I got in my wallet. And then we'll see how good you are at being able to identify where it is that he's lying. Because imagine yourself as future jurors. All you get to hear is testimony. You're going to get to hear him answer questions. We're going to see how good you are at identifying where he's lying, just simply based on the answers that he's given to these questions. Okay, so blue lines up here. Those are the ones around the chest and the abdomen. Yep. All right, the green line, look straight ahead, Zach. I'll show you all again. So the green line is the electrodermal. The black line is the motion sensor pad on there. You notice if you just pick your leg up there for me.
Pick my leg up?
Yep, there you go. See how you got that nice spike in there? It tells me he's moving. And then the red line, once I get the blood pressure cuff inflated, that's going to be the blood pressure cuff. All right? Please remain still. The test is about to begin. Regarding the number written on the piece of paper in your pocket, is it the number 1?
No.
Is it the number 2?
No.
Is it the number 3?
No.
Is it the number 4?
No.
Is it the number 5?
No.
Is it the number 6?
No.
Is it the number 7?
No.
Is it the number 8?
No.
Is it the number 9?
No.
Is it the number 10?
No.
This test is now over. Please remain still while I take the instrument out of operation. You can relax. Okay, nicely done, Zach. So I'm going to take it and back this up so we can look at it real quick. I'll get these components off so you can sit back there and watch. Okay, so with this test, normally I'm going to run this test 3 times. I'm usually going to run it forward 1 through 10. I'm going to run it backward 10 through 1, and then I'm going to run it in random order. And we don't want the first couple of numbers we ask about on the test to be the possible correct numbers that he's not being honest to. So I asked about 10 numbers, but I only had 6 cards that he could take and choose from. So the numbers 1 and 2 were not possible numbers. The numbers 9 and 10, that's the number. Numbers 9 and 10 were not possible numbers. So the only possible numbers that he could have had were the numbers 3 through 8. All right, which are the ones that we've got up there. So by show of hands, how many think he had number 3? None. Number 4. Number 5. Number 6. Number 7. Number 8. Man, see, if I was doing it from the audience, I'd be in big trouble. Man, that mental countermeasure you were doing at 7 was awesome. That was good. My 40 bucks, number 5. Number 5, awesome. Okay, let's talk about why it was number 5. This test is called a acquaintance exam. It's called a know and lie test. It's also called a peak of tension test. Zach knew exactly where he was going to be lying on this examination. So, up until the point that he lies, his tension is getting greater and greater and greater. And then once he lies, all that tension is gone. He knows he's going to be truthful the whole rest of the examination. So you see, he's cruising along up here, and man, that first electrodermal hit you gave me right there was fantastic. You look at his blood pressure, and all of a sudden it's like a slide drop off right there. This comeback you had right there was because you took a big old deep breath there, because you have been tensing so long, and I don't know why my pointer part's not working, but these right here on those two, look how much smaller those breaths are. Lying is like getting punched in the gut. All of a sudden, I can't. I finally got a deep breath in by the time I got to number 6, and that's why we got that other stuff. So that tells me his body responds exactly how I'd expect it to, in very prototypical ways. So now when I move on to that next test that I got to do, did he rob the bank, or did he manufacture the drugs, or whatever it is, I can know I've identified that he responds the way he should, and Zach now knows you know what, if I tell the truth, I'm in good shape because he can see where I'm lying. And he also knows if I'm lying, I'm screwed. And right here, before I even get into the test, is where I get a whole bunch of confessions with people. They're like, if I can't lie about a number on a piece of paper and get away with it, how can I possibly hope to lie about what I'm really in here for and be able to get away with it? All right, let's turn the time over to the dean for some comments, and then I'll take whatever question we got when she's done.
Let's do it with questions.
Okay. What questions do you have?
Can you
Shoot.
beat the box? Can you beat the box?
Can you beat them? Could I? Or could anybody?
Pick one.
Well-
You talked about countermeasures. What do you have in mind for countermeasures? What does that term mean?
All right, well, countermeasures is something that somebody is attempting to do to get a false negative. All right? And a false negative means they pass your test without being completely truthful. Now, traditionally, I talked about polygraph.org being a good website. If you go to antipolygraph.org, that's a site run by George Maschke. He was a former, I think it was FBI or CIA applicant who failed multiple polygraph exams, did not get chosen based on the results of the polygraph exam, so he kind of made it his life's mission to try and help people to cheat on the polygraph to be able to successfully get through. Now, if you go look at where he is located, he's living in the Netherlands. Because at this point, if you actually try and help somebody to cheat on a polygraph exam, Doug Williams, go Google Doug Williams, incarcerated, former polygraph examiner who was helping people try to cheat on the exam, was getting paid to do it, and they prosecuted him, I think it was for perpetrating a fraud on the government in terms of trying to help people do that. But the traditional way, I'm sure you've seen, like, I don't know, Ocean's 11 or 12, like put a tack in your shoe and step on it, wear rubber underwear, do an anal sphincter squeeze, these physical things. And that's the whole point of this pad, which has been, about the last 10 or 15 years, is to make sure people are sitting still and not moving on the test. Now, the tough thing is when we deal with mental countermeasures. Somebody's not physically moving, but they're trying to simulate things that would cause fear in them and generate a response. And if you imagine standing on the edge of the Grand Canyon with your back to it and closing your eyes and just tipping off the back and falling, or that being right at the top of a roller coaster just as it's about to go over the edge, you can generate some massive electrodermal responses. The problem is, unless you've got somebody who can train you to say, that's a reasonable response. I mean, if I've got this all right here and I'm looking at about, this much response, and all of a sudden I got something hitting the roof of my screen there, that response is too good to be true. It's not a legitimate response. And so while mental countermeasures is something we certainly pay attention to, somebody would have to be extremely sophisticated. And the other thing is if somebody does countermeasures and they successfully get through, nobody's going to tell you about that. They're not going to go, whoa, I lied and I beat you. Thanks, you're done. That's not going to happen. But we do, on an almost daily basis, have people who come into the DOD and these different departments, and they're trying to get these jobs and not be honest about what's gone on in the past. And realistically, when we look at pre-employments and people coming in here, what do you think the number one character trait that we're looking for at all these places is? Close. It's trustworthiness. We're going to be giving people access to information, and we have to be able to trust them to do the right thing with that information. And even sometimes in their employment of protecting that information, that means they don't get to necessarily be completely honest with all those people they deal with because they're protecting the information. I mean, how many perfect people do you think we have that work at the Department of Defense who've never made a mistake in their entire life? Donut. The last perfect person I've ever heard about was like 2,000 years ago. I'm not too worried about that person showing up in my office and saying, hey, Brian, I'd like to take a polygraph to work for the NSA. Not going to happen. What we're concerned about is what is somebody going to do in the future with information that they are granted access to. So our best indication of future behavior is past behavior. If we know nobody's been perfect in the past, the likelihood they'll be perfect in the future is pretty slim. The question becomes is, how are they going to deal with those future bad situations? So if they'll be honest about what's not perfect in their past, they'll most likely be honest about what's not perfect in the future. I mean, illegal drugs is absolutely the easiest one for us to look at. I mean, again, smoking weed. If you're smoking weed 2 weeks before your test, probably not a good fit for the agency. But if it's been, 1, 2, 3, 4 years ago, recreational use or those kinds of things, those people get through all the time. I mean, we're not looking for perfect people, we're looking for trustworthy. All right, you have a question?
That was actually it, about number 7.
All right.
So what do you do if, like, go to the card and you go all the way through it and there is no indicators? Do you just like, well, I think this is going to work on?
Well, I mean, what we'll do is we'll find out what they had, see if there's something that I can see in the data that's there, then I'll rerun the test. I mean, usually when I'm doing a polygraph exam, it's a 4-hour block process that we block out. Now, do I get to 4 hours most of the time? No. Usually I'm about 2.5. But we want to make sure that we've got that good indication that this person could produce physiological responses consistent with what we're looking for. And the number of times somebody would come up, contra, we get that, but no response at all, super rare. I'd be more concerned about my equipment than I would be about somebody who's not going to give me anything. Sure, yeah, I mean, a process would be, okay, well, your body's not producing much for me. What did you have? All right. Well, now I can look and see, do I see anything as I got those? Then I just go back and do a different acquaintance exam, make sure that I can see that and go, okay, now we're good to go. That's how I deal with that. All right, so we've got about 5 minutes. I want to present something to you, just food for thought for yourselves. You as future attorneys, you're going to be dealing with arguments. Very few things are going to be black and white. I mean, how many Supreme Court cases are decided 9-0? That's one here in New Jersey. Not very many. So you're going to have arguments that you're going to have to make. Now, how many of you, when you talk about the accuracy of a test, in terms of diagnosing what it's meant to diagnose, how many of you, we're going to give you some percentages, would allow testimony on this particular examination and the results of this examination to be admitted into a criminal court case? So, let's start with our civil standard, all right? More likely than not, 51%. How many of you, if a test was 51% accurate, would allow that to come in to your criminal court case? 1? Okay. So let's move up to 70%. If a test is 70% accurate, how many of you would allow that to come into your criminal court case? Few? All right. All right, let's go to 90%. That's kind of the really gold standard. If a test is less than 90% accurate, how many of you would say it's not coming in, I don't want to hear, we shouldn't hear about it? How many of you would fight to keep it out? All right, good half. All right, so when we talk about accuracy of different tests, and before I went to the DOD, I was working for law enforcement. I was also working for a whole bunch of firms doing post-conviction sex offender work, and I dealt with a whole bunch of psychologists. And so when we talk about the accuracy of tests, all of you said if it's under 90%, it doesn't come in. You eliminated polygraph, specific issue. You eliminated MRI scans, CT scans, X-ray scans, and every single psychological test that is out there. When we take an X-ray, I had 3 boys, they played a whole bunch of sports. I think about every other month we were getting X-rays, and there are times where the radiologist would look at it and go, wow, he's got a displaced fracture. I'm like, any idiot could see that. It's like bent 90 degrees. And then there are times where they'd look at it and go, you know what, I can't tell. Probably a green break. We ought to cast it up. But if I had to put him on the stand and have him testify to a medical certainty, not happening. Great test. But it's still only in the 80s at diagnosing what it's meant to diagnose. You get down here to the MMPI, the Minnesota Multiphasic Inventory, helping determine psychopathy in individuals, whether this person is competent to stand trial or not. 60s. But yet, we have competency to stand trial experts all the time. You'll have psychologists up there, 5 of them say this person is absolutely competent to stand trial. You have 5 others who will say this person is looming as a burden. They're looking at the exact same test and the exact same answers to those tests. But yet, the only one that's on that list right there, it's not getting in as a matter of course, is polygraph exam. And so you kind of got to ask yourself, well, why is that? I mean, it's a super accurate test. New Mexico, it gets in. A bunch of places it gets in with Dauber. I think a lot of the people, they look at the argument of polygraph, and as opposed to DNA or fingerprint or, a bunch of these other ones, they say, all right, well, prosecutor's got that fingerprint, which says he was at the bank on January 2nd, the day it happened to get robbed, and the jury goes, oh, well, his fingerprint was there, and wow, they found some of his hair there too. Well, we can make the connection and go, well, he must have robbed the bank. If I give him a polygraph exam and say, did you rob the First National Bank on January 2nd in Houston, Texas? No. Wow, you were lying. Well, that kind of becomes an ultimate issue problem. If you hear, well, did you rob the bank? No, you failed. What more really is there for a jury to have to make a determination on? Then the other can be a 403 argument of it's more prejudicial than probative. To hear that kind of information can be difficult. Can you give it the proper weight that you really ought to be giving it? It's kind of tough. But then all the future defense attorneys, you look at it and go, wow, I got a he said, she said case. My guy is adamantly saying that he didn't do this. Not only that, he took a polygraph and he passed. But yet I can't get that polygraph in without a pre-stipulation. I'd submit that a good argument for future discourse would be the whole character for truthfulness evidence that only the defense can open up. A prosecutor can't say, wow, look at all those bad acts you committed in the past. They can't bring that up unless the defense opens the door with character for truthfulness evidence. So, a lot for you guys to think about, but again, polygraph.org. Find yourself a good polygraph examiner. You're going to win a lot of cases if you've got a good polygraph examiner that you can take and utilize and help direct your cases and just be that much better, and then also you're not going to get caught off guard. If you have questions, by all means, I'll stay after and answer any of your questions. Thank you for having me.
Thank you guys for coming out today. I really appreciate it. We've had an awesome experience. Great presentation, Mr. Morris. Be on the lookout for more events. We're going to have some in March and April as well. We're not going to be going